live stream microphone check. Three, two, one, 3, 2, 1.
Right, good evening everybody and welcome to this meeting of the Local Plan Committee of Colchester City Council. I'm the Chair, Councillor Tim Young. The meeting is being live streamed and will be available to view after the meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. A few matters of housekeeping as usual to begin with. Action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, not that, that's the clock, please evacuate the grand jury room by going back through the main entrance and down the stairs or via the staircase at the side of the building and then to the car park behind the Town Hall in St Ronald Street. We will have a short break if we need one at 7:30 p.m. and please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and participants please mute the microphones when not speaking. Okay, introductions. I'll ask each member and officer around the table to introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Councillor. That one. Got it, sorry. Councillor Mixby, representing Shrob End Ward.
Councillor Martin Parsons, representing Mersey and Pyfleet Ward.
Councillor Faith Smalls, Old Heath, the Row Hedge.
Councillor Mark Corey, representing Wivenhoe Ward, substituting for Councillor Sean Kelly.
Richard Coakley-Taylor, representing Castle Ward.
Councillor Vanessa Moffat, Mile End Ward.
Andrew Ellis, Marks Tay and Layer Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Paul Dundas, Tiptree Ward, substituting for Councillor Smithson.
Shelley Blackerby, Principal Planning Policy Officer. Rachel Forkin, Principal Planning Policy Officer.
Laura Goulding, Planning Policy Officer.
Simon Cairns, Joint Head of Planning.
Sandra Scott, Place Strategy Manager.
Karen Syrett, Joint Head of Planning.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much. Substitutions have already been indicated. Just to confirm that Councillor Corey's here, substituting for Councillor Kelly, and late on off the bench, Councillor Dundas, substituting for Councillor Smithson, who hoped to be here virtually. He's had an eye operation, but he wasn't able to in the end. Item 3, urgent items. Are there any? No urgent items. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Any councillors wish to declare an interest in any items that are on the agenda? No? All good. We've got 2 sets of minutes to agree. They're the ones held on the 22nd of February 2024 and the 22nd of May 2024. You've seen them, they're on the agenda. Are there any points of accuracy that needs to be raised? No, that's good. So can we approve both those sets of minutes, please? All those in favour? Anybody against? Then that is carried. Which moves us on to item 6, which is general have your say. Under the new regulations, people have registered in advance, so I will call you in the order I have on the sheet in front of me. And the first one is Mr. Richard Martin, please. If you come forward, I think you know the score, Richard. You've got 3 minutes, a bell will sound after 2 and then again after 3. Then officers will respond if necessary, and then you get another minute to reply. The time will start when you begin speaking.
Right, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to just ask, how does the committee feel about the prospect of a developer building 1,000 houses on a local wildlife site, which supports part of the second largest nightingale population in Britain, as confirmed by the British Trust for Ornithology, and a fact missed by Stantec and ecologists, even though this had been known since 2012. In fact, Stantec even quoted an MOD source claim that nightingales have never been incidentally recorded at the allocation boundaries or mitigation land during its use by the MOD. This is the same area where locals have heard nightingales for generations and where 59 singing males were recorded on the 3rd of May 2024. Clearly, a lot of people have been badly misinformed and misled. You have hopefully seen the front page of the Essex County Standard from CD Mail with headline findings: Colchester is the premier UK site for nightingales. This should be a source of celebration and pride for Colchester. Instead, it's the most threatened site for this red-listed species in the country. Secondly, the proposed buy for Middlewick may have been subject to speculation, but recent news has reached us that it is Dandara Homes. already being looked at by this council breaching planning conditions at a development in Cotford. This is very worrying, again highlights the need for urgent action without further delays. Thirdly and finally, during the past meeting, I sat here in this seat and expressed my concerns about developers trying to get around planning conditions imposed by planning inspectors. Since then, 17 of the county's top naturalists and practically all conservation organisations have said that the impacts on habitats, wildlife like acid grass, invertebrates and nightingales cannot be mitigated or compensated. They say very clearly that no planning conditions on Earth can repair this damage and no 10% biodiversity net gain can realistically achieved on or off-site. Does the council expect your independent ecologist to contradict the verdict of 17 top experts and Essex Wildlife Trust, Bug Life, RSPB, Essex Field Club, Colchester Natural History Society, Butterfly Conservation and CPRE Essex? If, as expected, the independent ecologist supports this universal consensus amongst independent experts that development cannot go ahead on Middlewick, have the council made plans and prepared to replace this puzzle piece in the local plan? And can you describe the timing and steps which will be taken and when the allocation for houses on Middlewick will finally be withdrawn? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Who's going to respond? Sandra, please.
Thank you. Yeah. Just in relation to all the information that's referred to on the recent surveys on nightingales, I can confirm that this has been received by officers at the council and it has been shared with the ecologists carrying out the surveys on behalf of the council. It must be acknowledged at this stage those surveys are limited to botanical and invertebrate species as advised by Natural England. But all of the information, the sightings and recordings received from credible experts will continue to be shared with the ecologist, and both now and in the future for any further work that is commissioned to support further considerations going forward. And in relation to the final point about timing and looking at to use your phrase, the puzzle piece of Middlewick. The local plan review is looking at the plan evidence for the whole area and looking at opportunities to take into account all up-to-date evidence to reflect what a new plan to be prepared, justified by evidence. That is happening now, and there's a whole procedure to go through, and considerations in relation to Middlewick will form part of that alongside the comprehensive local plan review, and that is happening and is part of this agenda. Thank you.
Sandra. Richard, you have another minute if you wish to use it.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification on the on-site biodiversity net gain. I know it's national policy now to have 10%, but with information that Dandara is already asking national organisations for off-site sites to get round the Middlewick's unique habitat. I just wondered if this is going to be carried on to the next plan, that it will be an on-site only biodiversity net gain. Thank you.
Sandra?
I think that's to be determined by the evidence as we progress through the further considerations of the plan, but the requirement for biodiversity net gain is now a statutory requirement and will be part of the considerations informed by the evidence.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Richard. Our next speaker is Mr. William Jolliffe. If you'd like to join us at the table, Mr. Jolliffe. You have 3 minutes, and as before, a bell will sound after 2, and then after 3 when you have to wind up, and then you'll get a minute after the reply from the officers. The time will start when you start speaking.
Good evening, everybody. Well, as a lifelong resident on Mersey Road for 71 years and regular passing on my bicycle and occasionally walking on Middlewick with friends, I was utterly disappointed when the glorious SWEC was drafted onto the local plan. I honestly do not know any one Colchestrian that wants it developed and concreted. Has any one councillor been past lately? The Wick has looked glorious with an abundance of wild grasses, flowers, broom and now many young oaks, also brambles, which is ideal for nesting birds. It would be a serious crime to house it. Then there's the nightingales, also many nighttime creatures, badgers, foxes, etc. that go over there in the evening time. I know you, the council, say the final decision is MOD and government's. My argument is, if that's the case, why call it a local plan? Will the general election help? No, because both main parties, Tory and Labour, are for more housing and development. Would Reform UK help? Possibly, but they will not hold balance of power. But they could give the others a bit of a kicking. And try to listen to the local voters' worries. So please, councillors, do the honourable thing and reject that awful plan at this stage, the plan to build on our wonderful Wick. I know deep down you realise you made a grave mistake by adding the Wick onto the local plan. So here's hoping sense will prevail, finally remembering the COVID lockdown that was 2 years ago. Middlewick came into its own in the COVID lockdown. Then many folk that don't have gardens walk on the Wick help them in spirit and honest exercise. If it was not there, people have nowhere for good fresh air. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jolliffe. Sandra?
I think the comments I just made previously to Mr Martin's comments apply to Mr Joliffe's comments. I think I would just say in respect of the previous decisions, the plan was examined and found sound. What we're looking at now is a local plan review which will take into account any updated evidence to inform the plan as a whole as we go forward.
Thank you, Sandra. Do you wish to employ your right to have another minute, Mr. Jolliffe?
Yeah. Do any of you honestly think that the Wick can be saved from housing? Because that really is the most ghastly decision. I mean, as I said there, I don't honestly know of one true Colchestrian that wants the Middle Wick developed. I mean, that's the most glorious area in the south of Colchester. That would be a scandal to concrete. I mean, the traffic's... I just come down Mersey Road now about an hour ago on my bicycle and must stop and start all the way from St Botolph's roundabout, right up past the Grapes, past mine and then onto the Wick. I mean, I can't cope now with traffic. So what the heck, you know, people put housing on there, so I just can't get round it.
Thank you very much. Anything to add? No, thank you very much. I think you probably united the committee in one of your statements by saying I don't think any of us probably agreed with your comments about Reform UK. But thank you for your contribution this evening. The next speaker is Councillor Dave Harris. Please, Dave, come forward. You know the score. And timing will start when you hit the button.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for allowing me to have my say this evening. The same theme as the last two speakers is where I'm coming from. Mr. Jolliffe knows, as Mr. Martin knows, that if we hadn't had a local plan and it had been voted down on the evening that it was voted in, you'd have 2,000 plus in that, and that's the advice of all of the political party leaders and the council officers at the time. So that's an aside. My questions are very simple, so I will be brief, Chair, because I know you've got a lot of business to go through. You've already answered part of the question, but I wanted to tease out a bit more about the survey that's been done on the nightingales. I wanted to be reassured doubly to make sure that is part of now the evidence and it is analysed and tagged as sound evidence on that site. That's the first question. And the second one really is about where we go from here. I see there's a call for sites on the consultation, Chair. There's no list on there that I can see that says call for sites to be removed, because I would certainly be stepping up to the plate and asking for that to be removed now. And I wanted to make sure that that process is not going to fail us at the 11th hour because of the process or lack of it in taking something out of a site. I think it's much more complex to take something out from my understanding of what I've read, and I've read several bits and pieces on the documents, then the call for sites is. The call for sites is much simpler, adding places in and assessing them. And I just want to make sure that process will not fail us at the 11th hour. I think where I'm coming from is backing the committee in their review, but hoping and ensuring and empowering all of us to go and make the right decision. Thank you very much for listening to me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Sandra?
Yeah, just to reiterate the point in respect of the surveys and the information that's been received, that is received and acknowledged and recognised of the source that's come from, and at the appropriate time that will be considered alongside all the relevant evidence by the experts. Just in respect of the call for sites, is part of the process that we're required to go through to inform the evidence base. We wouldn't, that doesn't need usually, or it wouldn't include call for removing sites. The consideration on what may be carried forward or not that's in the current plan is part of the consideration, informed by all of the evidence as part of the plan making process, and will be considered through the coming meetings of this committee as the plan is further considered.
Thanks, Sandra. You have another minute, Dave, if you wish to use it.
Nowhere near that amount. Just one simple question: how can the ordinary Colchester area and myself and local councillors influence that review, please, apart from coming to this committee? Because I've tried online and it doesn't lead me to a direction where I can actually say remove that from the site.
There will be various stages of formal consultation, which when everyone will be able to engage and comment on what's proposed in a draft plan. That will be later this year, following hopefully further consideration by this committee. The issues and options consultations that we have been undertaking since the middle of last year on various themed topics are continuing. The opportunity for the wider public to engage in all of those topics, which is a further update on later on this agenda, continues, and some of those are underway at the moment, and there's an opportunity for anyone and everyone to participate in that going forward.
Karen just wants to add something.
Yeah, just to say, Dave, although there's no formal call to remove sites, many people have put forward Middlewick for alternative uses. So effectively, it's the same as saying remove that housing allocation and allocate it for open space or something like that.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Our final Have Your Say speaker in the general part is Joseph Beale, who is joining us via Zoom. Hello, Mr. Beale. Can you hear us?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
You have 3 minutes, yeah, we can hear you. A bell, if you can hear it, will sound after 2 and then again after 3, and you'll get a chance to respond after the officers have answered your initial points. Your time will start when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Joe Beale, RSPB Conservation Officer for Essex and Kent. The RSPB would like to express our serious concerns for the important population of nightingales at Middlewick Ranges and the surrounding area. Nightingales are red-listed birds of conservation concern. They suffered a devastating 48% UK population decrease between 1995 and 2020. At the Middlewick site, Birchbrook and Weir Lane contain part of one of the highest nightingale populations in the UK. The calculated 67 territories within the site and the indicated mitigation area, all of which would be directly impacted by any development. There's a spring 2024 conservative estimate, a peak evening count rather, of 125 singing males within the wider population, including Friday Woods and Roman River site of special scientific interest. These highlight the clear national importance of this area for nightingales and reinforcing the 2012 British Trust for Ornithology's National Nightingale Survey results. In fact, the broader Colchester barracks population is potentially second only in importance nationally to Chassenden Woods and Lodge Hill Triple SI in Kent, and that's a site that's been designated in part for its nightingales. Middlewick Ranges and Birchbrook Woodlands are a key part of a wider network of connected sites, so they're integral to this connection. Local wildlife sites in Triple SI south of Colchester, forming an important habitat complex. It's one of Essex's largest local wildlife sites, that's Middlewick Ranges, and is clearly a much-loved community green space, and also contains one of the largest remaining acid grassland habitats in Essex. And this is a priority habitat under the NERC Act, the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act 2006, which requires local authorities to be able to show that all biodiversity, especially species and habitats of principal importance, are protected and enhanced. And the edge habitat around the site is also significant, so it's not just a few habitats, there's edge habitat as well. Okay, there's lots of other species involved, which I won't go into now. Amber listed and red listed birds. So aside from habitat loss and the difficulty in mitigating a complex mosaic of habitats off-site, there will also be an impact of 1,000 houses on the habitats, both for fragmentation and as a result of free-roaming cats being introduced. And this can be a real problem for ground nesting birds such as nightingale. And there's very little to mitigate the acute impacts of housing next to important populations of ground nesting birds like nightingales. So once the houses, if they were to be built, would also be a problem apart from the habitat loss itself. There's an umbrella organisation, a group of environmental NGOs, ENGOs, including the RSPB, Buglife, Butterfly Conservation, Essex Field Club and others, all deeply concerned about the possible loss of this site to development. And we consider that it's enough to justify its protection.
Mr. Beale, that's your 3 minutes.
Thank
you very much. I'll ask Sandra to respond.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know how much Mr. Beale heard of the responses to the previous comments, but I think there's a common theme, so forgive me for repeating some of my answers. But all of the information regarding the nightingale surveys has been received by the council and shared with the council's ecologists, and I think it's understood the relative significance of this data in relation to that species, and in relation to the wider ecological interests. I think that's well documented, and there's a wealth of evidence that we are well aware of and is being collected both by our own ecologists and other experts on a regular basis, and all of that will be relevant evidence to help inform us going forward. And just in terms of the proposal on the table at the moment, the local plan is supported by a robust policy that is intended to deal with the need to adequately mitigate against the proposals that are put forward on the table, if that come forward.
Karen, you want to add something?
Well, actually, I wanted to ask Mr. Beale a question, if it was possible.
I'll allow it.
Thank you. Mr. Beale, you mentioned free-roaming cats, but I just wondered if dogs had a similar impact on ground nesting birds.
So with nice...
A minute's right to reply. I might, as Karen's asked you a question, I might be a bit lenient and giving you a bit more, Mr. Beale. Okay,
just to answer the cat question, at Lodge Hill, which is the Triple SI designated in part for nightingales, the RSPB considers a 400-metre radius a minimum to buffer from cats. Dogs also can cause disturbance and damage, but cats are slightly more of an issue for this particular species. Shall I carry on for my 1 minute?
Yes, please.
Okay. Just to say, that we have a rare opportunity to pause and work with the MOD and amongst the council to save this remarkable place, come up with an alternative plan that would benefit us all. It's clearly very valued and very important. And as others have said before, it can be a source of pride and celebration for Colchester. And I think it's a really unique opportunity to get something good from this. And I'm really glad that the council is aware of its importance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beale. I think that's just for noting. Thanks very much. Thanks to all our Have Your Say speakers tonight. That ends the general Have Your Say section. So we'll move on to item 7, which is local development scheme. I've got no visiting councillors wishing to address the committee, so I'll invite Laura to present the report, please, Laura.
Thank you, Chair. Members may recall that we regularly review and update the local development scheme, known as the LDS, most recently in February 2023. The LDS sets out the timetable for the local development documents this council will produce to guide development in Colchester. This includes details of member approval dates, future consultation periods, and expected dates of adoption and publication. The LDS now requires updating to reflect further consultation and timetable variations for local plan review and the development plan document for the tendering Colchester Borders Garden Community, as well as a timetable for supplementary planning documents, SPDs. The revised LDS provides a scope and further details with regards to each document and includes a project chart which outlines the timescales proposed and shows how each document will be progressed until 2027. The project chart has been updated to reflect the proposed timescales in a clearer way. We've created 2 charts, one focusing on the local plan review and the other for the Garden Community PD and the proposed SPD. We hope these changes will make it easier to understand what's happening and when. The position of the various neighbourhood plans which are being progressed across the city have also been updated and shown within the LDS. A summary of the amendments made to the LDS since its last publication are set out in Appendix 2 of the LDS document. The committee are asked to agree these updates to the local development scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Ask members of the committee if they've got any questions or comments they wish to make on this report. Councillor Corey.
Thank you. I will be a bit colloquial in terms of relating to the tendering borders garden community, and just ask. I understand that we're still looking for the publication of information of modelling of the link road no longer being a link road in terms of it only being a road that goes halfway, if that. And I just wondered, with the annual monitoring report, it talks about strategies, policies and targets not being achieved. So in a sense, a link road not being achieved, how is that being monitored? And it talks about providing the data and information across the city's administrative area. So I know this is more predominantly Essex and Ringway Jacobs and the partners that are going forward with that. But I just wanted to understand how that influences our LDS and how we're getting that information going forward. Thank you.
Who's going to answer that, Karen?
Yeah, happy to. Although probably not a very satisfactory answer, I'm afraid to say. But the local development scheme and the annual monitoring report, authority monitoring report as it's now known, monitor plans, policies, strategies and how they're implemented and how effective they are, not the delivery of something like a link road which is tied into applications. That sort of thing isn't monitored by our documents here. And Chairman is right, it is a county council function really.
Do you want to come back? Yeah.
If you don't mind, thank you. I just think it's quite important in terms of the delivery of the sustainable settlement, the delivery of the development plan, which is about ensuring we have the accessibility, the sustainability of that settlement. And I'll come back to this later as well in the housing numbers, requirements and spatial strategies, because it just seems to me as if we're monitoring how we're progressing on the plan, that is quite a fundamental factor. And I hope that's going to continue to be reviewed and reported, even if it is dependent on other partners delivering it. Will we achieve our strategies if we don't have the infrastructure in the way that our plans said would be there in the first place?
Noted, Karen? Yeah. Councillor Dundas.
Yeah, just very briefly, just to follow up what Councillor Corey said, and this does perhaps link into the next item as well. If memory serves, the local plan as adopted specifically says that the link road has to have funding in place for development to take place at the garden community. Therefore, are we sure that that funding is in place? It doesn't say where it comes from. It can come from county, it can come from section 106, it can come from elsewhere. But unless we're very confident that that funding is in place from somewhere, then that would seem to be a potential issue, would it not?
Karen?
It's not an issue for this committee, no. It's an issue, A, for the joint committee, whether it's considering the development plan document, and indeed the inspector who's aware of the circumstances regarding the link road, and then it will be a decision for consideration by the joint committee when any planning application and if any planning application is submitted, but it's not for this committee.
Yeah, that's true. I think Councillor Bentley made an announcement about the link road last week, didn't he? It was in the press. And as far as I know, all three local authorities tendering, Essex and Colchester, are still supportive of the garden community. But if you want to attend their great meetings, attending the joint committee, then I would encourage you to do so, where I think a number of those questions can be answered. As Karen said, it's appropriate for you to bring them up, but not really appropriate for this committee to, under this item, to consider. Any other speakers? Yes, Councillor Smalls.
Sorry, just briefly, but, it says the planning policy team have benefited from low turnover in recent years, but there's a national shortage of planning officers and the risk needs to be acknowledged. Is that much of a risk for us at Colchester, that we might lose planning officers and won't be able to recruit more?
That's an excellent question and relevant to the report. Who wants to answer that?
Sorry, I'll just add one other thing, because that's in the context of the fit for the future, because I know things are being streamlined and that might make it possibly a less attractive place to work.
Yep, good question.
Yeah, I think the report's correct. We have benefited from a low turnover and we haven't had to use very many consultants or agency staff, unlike many or most authorities in Essex, really. I like to think that Colchester is a good place to work, both in terms of being a good employer, but also the variety and interesting work that happens here. You know, you've got a historic town centre, you've got a coastline, you've got countryside. You know, it's really quite varied. The concern is with more flexible working, then people could opt to work anywhere, really. And there are examples of people working overseas doing planning jobs. So it's always a concern, but you know, I'll touch wood and cross my fingers, but it doesn't come to that in Colchester.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I think we'd all agree that we're very fortunate to have some excellent planning officers in this authority, and we're very grateful for all the work that you do. Any other questions on this item? Then can I ask that we have a vote and approve the changes to the LDS, the Local Development Scheme? All those in favour, please show.
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 8, already been referred to by a couple of councillors. The local plan review, spatial strategy and housing numbers. We've got, again, no visiting councillors to address the committee on this report, so I'll invite Sandra to present it, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report covers the initial housing need number for the whole city area, as informed by emerging evidence prepared by consultants Iceni Projects. It goes on to provide further explanation of the factors which will inform the housing requirement number to be met through the local plan review to cover the period up to 2041. Finally, it also sets out the options for the broad spatial approach and spatial options, which will be subject to testing to inform the preferred options local plan, which will be presented to the local plan committee in the autumn with a view to public consultation in the autumn and winter of this year. Paragraph 5.5 of the report explains the different terms frequently used referring to housing numbers. It's important the difference between these terms is understood. Housing need is the number informed by the nationally evidenced standard method, previously objectively assessed housing needs, expressed as a number per year. The housing requirement is the total number of homes identified in the local plan for the relevant plan period. This usually reflects the housing need figure as a starting point, but is informed by further consideration of a range of factors and evidence. And housing supply is the number of houses and sites which contribute to meeting that housing requirement. This includes sites with planning permission, windfall sites, and permitted development, as well as housing allocations in the local plan or neighbourhood plans, justified and evidence as part of the plan making process. The need to review plans every 5 years means that it's necessary for the local plan review to update the housing need number for Colchester. The current number of 920 per year is based on the objectively assessed housing need, which was used in the adopted plan under the transitional arrangements. This evidence therefore now needs to be updated to inform the local plan review. The expectation now is that authorities determine the housing need for their area using the standard method, which is set out in planning policy guidance. Paragraph 61 of the National Planning Policy Framework refers to there being opportunity for exceptional circumstances where it may be appropriate to justify an alternative approach to assessing housing need. The consultants commissioned to carry out this evidence work for the City Council have advised that based on the standard method, in accordance with the planning practice guidance, the housing need for Colchester is 1,043 houses per annum. They've also considered the evidence which may justify exceptional circumstances and found no indication of any evidence to justify anything exceptional, upwards or downwards, for Colchester at this time. Paragraphs 5.11 to 5.16 of the report provide more detail on the consideration of this point. There are many considerations relevant to inform the number that is to be set as the housing requirement for Colchester for the local plan review. These include all of the evidence that's being prepared, environmental evidence, the infrastructure evidence and audit, including input from all the statutory infrastructure providers, transport evidence, the outputs from the strategic land availability assessment, and viability evidence, as well as anything else that on other topic areas. The evidence is all being prepared. The next item on the agenda provides an update on all of this and will help inform the housing requirement that can be justified and the number of homes that need to be provided by new sites in the local plan review to cover the period up to 2041. Turning now to spatial strategy options. In preparing the local plan, it's necessary to ensure the proposals are fully justified and that all reasonable alternatives have been considered. Having established the quantum of new development needed, it's necessary to establish the most appropriate strategy to support the distribution of that growth. This is the spatial strategy which is central to the local plan. This report from paragraph 520 onwards sets out the considerations relevant to inform the most appropriate strategy and the options that are being considered. At this stage, the options as identified in the report are just that, and the intention is that the approach and options will be tested against evidence, including infrastructure and environmental evidence, and the sustainability appraisal. All of this will help inform the preferred spatial strategy, which will be included in the draft preferred options plan to be considered by this committee in the autumn with a view to public consultation. The approaches and options cover all likely reasonable alternatives. The evidence may lead to a preferred strategy comprising elements of one or more of the options, but to enable these to be considered and tested, they're described here as different options. Finally, once the preferred spatial strategy is established, the settlement hierarchy may need to be reviewed. For information, the current hierarchy is included in the report at paragraphs 5.44 and 5.45. So the Local Plan Committee tonight are asked to note the emerging housing need figure of 1,043 and make and the spatial approaches and options put forward for testing to inform the plan making and the preferred options plan to be considered later this year by this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Before I bring members in, and I'm sure there'll be a number of speakers on this issue, I think you may have noticed we are in the middle of a general election campaign, and I'm pretty sure that it's item 5.34 that has led to certain candidates jumping on that item and saying that the council or the administration want to bring back West Tay as an option. Can Karen or Sandra confirm that this report was not done at the behest of any of the political groups on the council? It is the spatial options that are being put forward as options, as Sandra quite rightly pointed out, and are not the policy of any political group on the council and weren't put forward for them for this report. Karen?
Yeah, there's no decision being made tonight, neither has been a decision already made about what sites will be brought forward and whether any will be resurrected. But it's certainly not at the request of any political party. I can confirm that.
Thanks very much. I think that is important that we do state that, given what is appearing on social media. And I know we're in the heat of an election campaign, but hopefully Karen's made it quite clear that these are options and done at the behest of any of the political groups on the council. Right, I'll open it up now for members to contribute. I've got Councillor Dundas, Councillor Moffat, Councillor Coakley-Taylor and Councillor Corey in that order, Councillor, and then Councillor Ellis. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll bear in mind what you said about 5.3.4. I must admit I haven't seen the social media. I probably need to be a bit more observant. But just firstly, on the OAN figures, one of the things we know we're doing, and it was in the budget meeting back in February, is the administration of commissioned infrastructure audit, or infrastructure deficit audit, if that's quite the right title. Obviously, that is potentially a significant piece of evidence to form our opinion on these numbers. Can you confirm that that is actually going to be ready and taken account of by the autumn when we actually look at this properly? Because this is the time to take account of it if we're going to. So that's my question on the numbers. On the spatial strategy, on the 5.34, and I appreciate why it's in there, you have to list all the options, and there are a number of different spatial options, and it's a report just laying them out. It's not saying what we're going to do. The challenge around particularly Marks Tay last time out was the A120, and it was very specifically said when it went for inspection that the lack of the commitment to upgrading the A120 was one of the primary reasons it didn't pass. So my guess is that until we can clarify the situation of the A120, that's going to put a big question mark against any of that as an option anyway. So that's my first comment about that. On the transport options, we mentioned the RTS. I guess my question is how much weight we can put on that, because although we know financing for the infrastructure is there in terms of putting in bits of lanes and things, what we also know is that at the moment there isn't any financing secured for the operational model, and we've got no idea if or when it's going to start. All we've got the commitment on at the moment is the actual physical infrastructure on the road, not any buses or running costs or advertising and all the rest, which actually gets it up and running. Equally, what are we taking account of in terms of, and let's be honest, we know there are political events going on beyond this council at the moment. honestly don't know where all the numerous parties stand on the A12 upgrade, whether they're all committed to it. I haven't looked, I'll be absolutely frank, I don't know. If that were to not go ahead for any event, the upgrading to 3 lanes, what effect does that potentially have for us around sustainable development? And final question, promise the final one. We've got a town centre master plan under development. How does that fit into this, or how do you think it's going to fit into this? Because it must have some bearing somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. We have a city centre master plan.
You are quite correct, Chair. You are quite correct. Although, you know, it's a no-win situation, which one you call it sometimes, isn't it?
Thank you for your questions. Sandra, are you going to kick off? Thank you.
I'll kick off, and anything I miss, I'm sure Karen or others can pick up on. Firstly, on the infrastructure audit evidence base, that work is underway. It's been consultants, ACOM, have been commissioned, and the programming that they're working to will deliver the required outputs in time to inform the plan making. Question regarding the A120, I think the position in relation to that, I don't know if Karen wants to comment on that one, and potentially the A12. I think the evidence in terms of the most up-to-date position that we get as the evidence as part of the audit and the input from the key infrastructure providers will guide the assessment and in testing the various options. And the city centre master plan will be have the outputs from that will be the content of that will be considered as part of the various options that we look at in relation to the local plan. That is an adopted SPD that is on the table, and the content of that will have a bearing on the thinking as we go forward. Karen might have more to add on those other questions.
Thanks, Sandra. Karen?
Thank you. Yeah, just in terms of infrastructure funding, it's always tricky to get the timing of these things right. I know Andrew has been keen for us to do that for quite some time, but I really wanted it to help inform this local plan, and so as a result what we've done is it's a sort of two-stage approach really. So we look at the baseline and what infrastructure we've got, and then the second stage is what infrastructure we'll need. So I think the timing now is good. In terms of the A120 and indeed the A12, but the A120 first, we're reliant on working, of course, with National Highways. We've always engaged with them well. And in 2010, 2012, when we were producing the core strategy and then the site allocations, they were really quite sure that no development whatsoever would take place in Marks Day until the A120 had been improved, and I can't remember what they said about the A12. There may have been comments in relation to that as well, but basically that ruled out Marks Day as an option at that stage. They didn't take that approach in relation to the local plan we now have, which was from 2017 onwards. They certainly weren't as stringent at that point, but maybe that was because Essex County Council had already invested in the report that produced their preferred option to help inform the work National Highways would then go on to do. So it will be important for us to engage with them in terms of what infrastructure will be required and what growth can take place, not only in Marks Day but in other parts of the city area as well, dependent on infrastructure provision. I think Sandra answered the bit about the city centre master plan. RTS I jotted down, but I was jotting down a different answer, so I didn't catch the question. Sorry.
Yeah, if you could repeat it.
Thank you, Chair. It was really about the fact that how much weight we can put on at the moment, because although we know we've got funding for the physical infrastructure, We haven't got funding secured for the operating model, and we haven't got a date it's going to start. I've heard quite varying dates, because, yeah, we've got the money for the bits of bus lanes and that, but we haven't got any money for buying buses and funding it in its early years, when, being realistic, it's likely to be loss-making if it's to be running as a turn-up-and-go service as envisaged. So I was sort of questioning, you know, how much weight we can actually put on that.
Okay, that's something which ordinarily we might expect a developer to forward fund until a service is up and running. So it's often the case with these services, especially if you want them in from the outset. When you get the first few houses, you're never going to get the volume of passengers to provide a viable service. So that sort of thing is sometimes provided for through a Section 106 agreement. There may be other funding streams come on board, but that's the sort of thing that the infrastructure study will provide evidence on for us. And again, we'll need to consult not only with National Highways because of the impact on the A120, the other side of Colchester, but also Essex County Council as the local highway authority.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat, please.
Thank you, Chair. I had a high-level question around one of the spatial approaches, the community gain. I understand that it has to be in addition to any current policy requirements, but I just wondered how those gains are quantified or measured in some way, because it seems it could be quite complicated.
Sandra?
I think in the level that this is sort of drafted is really just floating the principle of an approach being based on sort of added value, if you like, as being the strategy, the guiding principle for the strategy, rather than sort of going into the detail of what that would look like. I think so. I think probably at this level, that would need to be further considered if the evidence was suggesting that might be either in whole or part the most appropriate option.
Okay. Councillor Kirkby-Taylor.
Thank you. I'm fairly sure that Councillor Corey had his hand up first, but...
we go in the order that I
was going to say, you have spoken, so we will do it this way, Ray.
Indeed we will.
Right, the number of houses per annum is going up a little bit. How much is that going to change in the coming years? Is that now... Can we be confident that it isn't going to continue going up? Or are we going to have to expect that it does go up, or are you already counting that increase over time in for when we bring the plan in? Obviously the political situation may change the number completely, but we can't count on any of that, so so the spatial strategy, am I right in understanding that at some point before the draft is prepared in the autumn, we're actually going to be sat in one of these meetings and expressing our opinions over which options and which spatial approaches we go for and which our preferences are? Two very minor questions that have come up purely for my own information. The environmental lead spatial option and Appendix 2, where it describes the different forms of green amenity that we've got. What is Middlewick currently counted at? I can't find any reference to it in the open space report that's linked. I'm assuming it's not a park. Is it rural or is it semi-rural? The 106 supporting bus services that Karen mentioned just a few moments ago, do we leave those supports variable and open-ended so that when the programmes inevitably slip, we just make the developers pay additional to continue supporting those, or are we left holding the bill if a developer pulls out partway through completion?
Thank you for those questions. Sandra?
Okay, I'll start in the order that you gave them and probably defer to Karen for the last one. But just in terms of the housing number, the evidence is looking at the plan period that we're working to of up to 2041. If that goes, once the plan's adopted, then if circumstances change, that may trigger a need to review earlier, but we would plan on the basis that that's the figure and that's what would be we would be planning for, and as there's a requirement for review every 5 years anyway, if circumstances change, then we'd be in that kind of review cycle in any event. So I think we would go forward on the basis that that's the figure that is the housing need that's based on the plan period that we're looking to up to 2041. You asked just to, will this committee consider indicating the option, views on the options prior to the draft plan? At the moment, it's the evidence work that we've talked about and described is assessing those options to inform a preferred option. The intention is to bring to this committee for consideration a preferred option plan to be consulted on, and that will be the time that this committee consider the plan as a whole and the preferred spatial strategy. In terms of the green amenity, I might ask Shelley if she has got a comment. Middlewick is an allocated site at this point in time, so that may be based on the position now is allocated in an adopted local plan. Shelley may or may not be able to help with your other more detailed question on green amenity, and then I'll let Karen answer the question on bus services.
Shelley, do you want to come in on the green?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was a bit confused with the question. I was sort of thinking, well, if I was going to answer it, then I would explain that Middlewick is allocated in the adopted local plan for residential development. It is a local wildlife site, and it's shown on the policies map as local wildlife site as well.
Okay, so that's its designation. Okay, Karen?
Thank you. Yeah, just to add a little bit of detail on the housing number question, it can vary between now and submission and adoption. Minor changes might occur because of changes in the affordability figure that goes into the standard methodology for calculating housing need. So that really is a dark art. And but take my word for it, that could change it, but it does tend to be a small change. The other things that could change it are, like you say, a change at national level, or a change as a result of the evidence that we're carrying out. So other evidence-based reports may say that number can't be supported, for example. So there could be changes as a result of that. We will be doing more briefings for the committee and other members on some of the spatial options and things between now and the next committee on preferred options, so that everyone understands better. And in terms of section 106 and developer requirements, they pass with any requirements passed to successors in title. So even if a developer pulls out, those clauses still apply.
Thank you. Councillor Corey, please.
Thank you. First of all, Councillor Dundas asked the question I was going to ask about the infrastructure audit, and the answer was helpful. My one concern is it's not worded in the paper, unless I've missed it, saying that we are doing our infrastructure audit. And I just wondered whether we could note it specifically, or if it could be worded specifically that that is what we are doing, and housing should be dependent upon that. So that's one of my first points and questions. Another point is in response to the response on the RTS, because again, years ago when we started out on this journey, the rapid journey, it was meant to be infrastructure led, it's meant to be delivered as part of the plan. So it's a real shame to hear now that it will be reliant upon developers, because that was the whole point of doing this. It was not to be reliant on developers. So I just wonder how we're now at that point, and can we rescue that in any way, shape or form? I suppose it would be down to more national government funding. Then a bit more colloquially as well, reading in the report, page 56, 5.25, substantial growth areas, the garden community, and it again says the garden community will be self-sustaining, a new community meeting the day-to-day needs for its residents. Again, I'm really concerned within that, without a link road, so no longer being developed as a link road, how will that be a self-sustaining community? And therefore, do we need to understand the links between the existing spatial strategy, with that not really being delivered as sustainable settlement? How are we going to rejudge that in the updated spatial options? And would the lack of a link road be an exceptional circumstance, as alluded to in 5.11? Because for me, it's an exceptional change from the original plan, not having that link road to the A120 to the A133. And also, what about 5.15, the air quality impacts as well? So the air quality impacts upon Clingo Hill, for example. Chair, you know that area well. It's already congested, already one of the highest points of congestion in Colchester. It's getting congested as of now because some of the initial works on the A133 are taking place. It's going to continue to get worse. So for me, that seems to be an exceptional circumstance. Those are most of my questions. The last point would be Wivenhoe, again colloquially, is seen as a sustainable settlement where further growth could happen. The garden community will fall partly within the Wivenhoe ward. So is the garden community included in that, or are you saying that potentially more extra development could come to the settlement of Wivenhoe? Thank you.
Sandra?
Yeah, the first point about the paper not mentioning that the infrastructure audit is underway, I think the next item probably updates on where we are with everything, and that is reflects that is underway, and obviously answered in relation to the programming of that. In terms of the housing number being dependent on that, I think the report kind of lists, can't remember the paragraph number now, but lists the factors that will be considered to inform what the actual housing requirement will be, taking forward whether to really establish whether or not the need of 1,043 can be delivered, and infrastructure is obviously one of the and the evidence that we're looking is one of the factors that's along with all the other evidence is included in that. The point on 5.25, I think I take your point and understand your concerns in relation to the tendering borders garden community, but in relation to the spatial approach, that's floating the idea of in an additional garden community and describing the principles that on which that would be based, rather than the garden, whether or not you feel the tendering Colchester Borders garden community is following that or not. That's the point of that spatial option in this report. And then just on the exceptional circumstances and air quality, I think the report listing the reference to air quality was referring to some examples where plans have either tried successfully or not, or are still emerging to demonstrate that they can't meet their housing need or need to be a lower number. With the air quality impact, in those examples, it's about the impacts of air quality on a special area of conservation rather than air quality as an issue. Obviously, air quality as in relation to environmental evidence will have to be considered as part of the local plan. And was there another question? Sorry, I've not noted another one down.
Karen wants to come in. Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you. Just in terms of the RTS, I don't think I said it's reliant on developer funding, but it's an option. And even if it is developer funded, that doesn't mean that it can't also be infrastructure first. That can be a requirement of any scheme in any 106. Let's see what else I had. The exceptional circumstances that you referred to in paragraph 511. If I give you the example that's in the National Planning Policy Framework, you'll see how high the bar is set. Such particular demographic characteristics could, for example, include areas that are islands with no land bridge and that have a significant proportion of elderly residents. I don't know, maybe the Scilly Isles? Don't think Mersey, right? Mersey's got a road bridge. Yeah. Well, and in terms of extra development in Wivenhoe, we haven't ruled anything out, anything in, but what we are doing is meeting all the parish councils, town councils, community councils. We had a good meeting with Wivenhoe last week or the week before, so that will help inform both the settlement boundary review and discussions about further sites in the future.
Right, okay. Do you want to come back briefly?
Thank you, Chair. Very generous. You did capture that last point, so thank you. But just on the garden community point, if I heard you right, Sandra, you were saying that that statement is about a future one. Is that therefore accepting the current one is no longer sustainable in that way?
No. In addition to, sorry, no. That is about an approach to a strategy that could include an additional garden development that follows garden community, garden city principles.
Thank you. Which would be sustainable with a fully functioning link road. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got, Councillor Sunnex, you are in for the next item. Councillor Ellis, then Councillor Parsons, then Councillor Small. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. The 1043, I do understand as a number, Sandra. It's just, I wouldn't want, while I'll note it, I'm not endorsing it, in my opinion this evening. Lots of people have talked about the infrastructure audit tonight. Infrastructure audit is something I asked to be done when I was the portfolio holder for housing and planning. I called it a development constraint audit, actually, because I thought it would give us the teeth that we needed to push back at government when we were talking about housing numbers, Chairman. Interesting that ACOM are undertaking it for us. I'm quite pleased about that. They're the people that did the Greater Essex Infrastructure Framework in 16 to 2036. It came out in 2017 was part of the evidence base at the last plan, and they found a £335 million infrastructure deficit for Colchester. And infrastructure is not just roads. People seem to be talking about roads as the infra. It's access to doctors, dentists, schools, hospitals, adult social care, water and waste, energy. The list goes on. One of the frustrations I have is that we cannot cure the problems from the past through S106 running under SIL legislation. And I felt if we did an infrastructure audit, we would have the teeth to go back to government and say, someone like Colchester who grows, we've always fulfilled our side of the bargain, let's face it. Year on year, Colchester has done its bit. To be able to go back and say, actually, we cannot continue to grow at this sort of rate unless we can do something to solve those infrastructure problems which have happened because of the growth that we've had in the past, and the only way we can therefore solve it is if we can get extra money from government, or we can capture land value uplift so that that developers, or rather landowners, are not going to be getting as much for their land as they're probably expecting, but the money will then be used to solve some of those infrastructure issues. And if we did that and other authorities did that, I think that would send a really strong message to government to say we simply can't continue to grow at the sort of rates that you want us to grow at without solving some of those infrastructure issues. So that's why I had wanted to do it. I'm delighted it's now being done. I am concerned that it's not going to be enough and in time to actually to make a real difference to this plan. It was all about development constraints, and one of the things we can push back, it seems to me, on these numbers is about the development constraints, where we can say where we do have those. Paul's already mentioned it, sorry, Councillor Dundas and others. The A120 is one of those. You've mentioned it yourselves. At one point, they were looking at no development on the A120 unless that upgrade happened. We're now not getting that upgrade. £9 million was spent by the County Council in doing that study to work out how that link road was going to happen. And now National Highways have decided that needs to be reconsulted on completely. It's scandalous, honestly, but we are where we are. From my point of view, whilst I can understand where, and I can see in the spatial strategies, we're talking about garden community principles, we're talking about growth to the west of Colchester. I can't see how that can happen. It is a constraint unless something is done to the A120. It's fundamental, in my opinion, to that part of the plan. The spatial strategies, I'm really pleased. I'm not pleased with them. I'm interested in all of them, and I'm delighted we're looking and testing at all of them. I'm really pleased Karen said that we're going to be undertaking a series of briefings. These are not set in stone in any shape or form. Again, I think the hairs have been set running because of paragraphs in here saying that West Tay may be coming back, what have you. What you're saying is these aren't set in stone in any way. These are up for discussion, and we'll be having a series of briefings and discussing these during the course of the year before we get to our preferred option stage. That's great. And I think that's probably me, other than to say to Councillor Corey, I told you so. He'll understand what I'm talking about, I think, when we get to the garden communities, where he starts thinking about the garden communities and non-delivery of the infrastructure first.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Response, Sandra?
Yeah, firstly, all those items of infrastructure that Councillor Ellis mentioned are being covered by the infrastructure audit. So I can assure you and reassure you of that. In terms of the timing, I think Karen commented earlier around it being appropriate now to inform the local plan review, and we're confident that that ACOM will deliver on the programming that is set to inform the plan making in an appropriate way. And I think in terms of looking at development constraints and the opportunity for the infrastructure, or the outputs from the infrastructure audit to challenge that number, I think all of the evidence that's being prepared and the whole and tested and considered will lead us to what that housing requirement is, to confirm whether or not there are any reasons that justify or either support us being able to deliver on that number, or justify us not being able to, and all of that evidence will inform that thinking as we go through the work and outputs of the evidence as it comes forward in the next few months.
Thank you. Good. Andrew, yes?
No, boring. Just reminded me, another thing I'd asked for was design codes, which we still haven't undertaken. And when I read a government report on this earlier this morning, I was up in the early hours, they were saying that design codes were one of the things that you could use to push back again as a constraint as to why you couldn't develop the numbers that you may be being asked to develop. So where are we with design codes at the moment?
Aaron?
We haven't got any money. Basically the situation. These things require resources and or commissioning, and we don't have the funding for that. I'd be very interested to see the article about design codes being used to push back on housing numbers, so do please share that with us. Simon might have something to add about design codes and their role in plan making.
We did put it in our budget, so you did have the money for it.
We did at one time, yes.
Simon?
Oh, sorry, that funding is obviously regrettably being lost. I too would be really interested to see how a design code could be used to justify reduced figures, unless we were dealing with an area that had such strong and exceptional architectural strengths that it justified extremely difficult viability grounds. So, for example, if we were dealing with an area where all the buildings were facing natural stone with natural stone roofs, or extensive use of very thatched buildings and villages, I could understand where there could be a justification there. However, given the Essex vernacular, I would have thought that it's unlikely that that would have any particular bearing on viability and grounds for not delivering on housing numbers.
So if you could share or circulate that article, Andrew, that would be very interesting for all of us, I think. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. If I ask them, can I make a plea that planning officers are think very, very carefully before using the word bridge in relation to Mersey? That's a high possibility of misunderstanding, with those two words being used together. The report we've got talks quite a bit about the standard method, but it doesn't tell us much about it. And from a governance perspective, that puts us as councillors in a little bit of a difficult position, because our job as councillors is to question, to probe, sometimes to challenge. But really, it seems to me we're being asked to just accept what the officers are saying, which is, these are the figures we get from the standard method of 1,043, and don't bother trying to challenge the standard method. Now, we've heard that the standard method, or part of it, is a little bit of a dark art. I've got two particular questions that I'd like to ask about it. The first is about to what extent it takes account of age profiles in the area. I ask that for two reasons. One is that new councillors' inductions, we were given some ward profiles, and those didn't include age data. So I'd like to be reassured on that point. Secondly, in a number of the rural wards, we've got an unusual demographic in that we've got some of the highest proportions of people aged 65 plus. And obviously, that means that we've got disproportionately small proportions of people in the 25 to 40 group, who would be the group that one would expect to be looking to become first-time buyers. So I'd like to be reassured, how does that get taken account in the standard methodology? And also the student population, which is obviously a transient population. Do you want, I've got another question, do you want to answer that before I...
No, if you ask them all, and then they'll
fine. The other one is, I understand that tendering have, in their housing needs assessment, have come up with a figure that's about half of our 1,043. Obviously, it is a different area, but it is next door to us, and obviously the major difference is it hasn't got the urban area of Colchester. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that one.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Karen.
Thank you. I'm very happy to it's not on. Sorry, I'm very happy to circulate some more information on the standard methodology for everyone. You know, there is a guidance note on it, so I'll circulate that because it's not intended to prevent you from fully understanding it whatsoever. And I don't think we have said do not challenge the results of the standard methodology. In fact, tonight, I think in Sandra's presentation and in response to questions, we've said if there is evidence to challenge it, we will. I'm just saying, by using the example in the National Planning Policy Framework, I think the bar is set high. I don't want to raise expectations unnecessarily, but if we can, then we will. So that's our position. We'll also circulate and publish the housing needs study when it's finalised, and when you see that, you'll see the level of detail that goes into it. Doesn't only look at what figure is produced from the standard method, but it also goes very much into the demographics, including the elderly and students, the impact of both those groups and others on the housing need. And it also splits the city area into some zones. So you'll see that there's quite different makeup in terms of existing housing stock in terms of demographics and things like that, according to different parts of the area. All that's taken into account. In terms of tendering, I can't comment on their figures because I don't actually think they've finished their study. So I'll be surprised if they're already able to say it's half our number. It's always been lower than us because their population is lower than us. But until we see that, but we can certainly ask colleagues there and see if there is an update from them.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Smalls.
Yes, I just want to ask specifically about the Hive. So we know there's potential for development in the Hive, which I'm generally positive about. With any development, will the flooding on Haven Road be taken into account? Obviously, I'm part of the Hive task force, and we do seem to be making some progress. So I've been on the Hive task force for a year, but when I've looked into this, and I might be wrong, it seems that this flooding issue goes back possibly to the 1960s, maybe even before, but people weren't, weren't around it. And then as the more development we've got in the area, obviously it's more of a problem because people need to use the Haven Road as access, and then you're having less green space for the water to runoff space. We know that the more concrete and hard surfaces you've got, that's going to exasperate flooding. So with any plans in the Hive, will that be taken into account as it is now? Obviously we hope that the flooding is going to be alleviated, but considering how long, the Hive task force has been around for a number of years, and we are now only just getting close to a bit of alleviation, not a solution.
Thank you. Sandra?
Yes, flooding will be taken into account. One of the pieces of evidence base is a strategic flood risk assessment, which will consider and provide evidence to inform sort of areas of particular high risk, and also consider, when we know what proposals are being put forward, any potential mitigation that might be needed in the event that any proposals could be impacted by that. So it very much will be a consideration, and the evidence will be there to help inform both in relation to the Hive or anywhere else where it is a factor.
Yeah, just with the Hive, it's more than a flood risk, because it is flooding that is regularly happening. It's it's horrendous at times.
Yeah.
I think that will be reflected in the evidence. That's the title of it, but it's looking at data that is based on flooding occurrences as well as risk factors. So.
Thank you. Councillor Dundas, you want to come back?
Yeah, just very briefly. One thing I should have asked earlier, actually. Paragraph 5.39 talks about the hub and spoke spatial model, and it makes particular reference to Wivenhoe sort of being linked to tendering, but of course that actually applies to a lot of areas within the city borough which are on the edge. Mersey obviously is a quite exceptional thing because it's got a lot of water near it. parts of villages in the north, in rural north, are perhaps linked to other settlements, almost Ipswich more than Colchester. And my own ward of Tiptree, it's a hub for places in Malden district, in Braintree district, and equally a spoke for places like Witham. So my question is, when we look at this sort of thing, how much of a sort of silo do we operate in, just thinking Colchester and a world doesn't exist beyond it, and how much are we actually taking account of what exists and what is happening in neighbouring districts?
Good question. Sandra?
Well, obviously the local plan is looking at the area within the administrative boundary of Colchester. We will obviously consult with our neighbours, and there's still currently a need to continue to demonstrate the sort of duty to cooperate and engage and show positive engagement. I don't think we'll be doing it entirely in a silo, but in terms of design, coming up with a strategy that's reliant on hubs and spokes, obviously identifying groups of parishes or villages or settlements that are within any area working together. It is limited to the area within the local plan administrative boundary, but I think there would be an acknowledgement of what goes on beyond, which may inform the thinking in the suitability and the way in which that model or approach may be appropriate or not, really.
Okay, Councillor Parsons, you want a second bite of the cherry?
Just a quick question in relation to that. Asking neighbouring councils is one thing, but we have a substantial proportion of population in some of the rural areas that have moved from places like Chelmsford. Are you saying we don't ourselves have that data on what proportion have moved from those other Essex council areas?
No, I don't think that's what I was suggesting, and I think the demographics and when we are able to publish more information on the housing needs report, we'll look at factors that include information linked to that. I think that evidence is available and information is available. I don't think that was what I was suggesting, no.
Do we have that data or don't we?
That data will be available, yes.
So we do have data on how many people have moved from, say, Chelmsford or Braintree into Colchester Borough?
Not broken down to that level, but in terms of migration movements and in-migration movements and that kind of population change, and that will be available in due course, I think.
Councillor Corey?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to the issue. I know it sounds like a broken record, but the about numbers being affected by the delivery of a link road or not. So if it's going to 2041, these numbers were predicated on the garden community going ahead, and the original number was 1250 in the initial plan. So if the link road is not delivered in full, would that affect the numbers up to 2040 and therefore this figure?
Karen?
So where's the 1250 from? Is that the number of houses that would be built in Colchester in the plan period to 2033?
In the garden community.
Right, okay. Yes, if we weren't convinced, regardless of the link road, for whatever reason, then if we didn't think 1,250 houses were going to be delivered, or indeed more, if you extrapolate that to 2041, then those new homes might have to be found somewhere else if that left a shortfall once we have identified the housing requirement.
Okay, I think the questions are more appropriate to the joint committee, which I'm sure you'll be at the next one, and Councillors King, Luxford Vaughan and Julie Young, I think, are our representatives on that joint committee, and it's I think more a matter for them to to look at. They're very pertinent questions and need answering. So let's, and there'll be representatives from Essex County Council, of course, who can tell us about the funding for the Link Road at that meeting. But thank you for raising it tonight. It is 7:30, so we're going to break for 10 minutes for as the Constitution demands. So back at 19:40, please. Start the recording again. Is that all right? Done, Owen? Yep, brilliant. We haven't quite finished item 8. We've got to go to the recommendations, and I would. No, you're not coming in for a third time, Councillor Corey. We go straight to the recommendations. And I do note what Councillor Ellis said. Does not mean we are endorsing. Just means that we are noting. Okay, it's very clear in the recommendations. Note the emerging local housing need figure for the local plan review covering the period up to 2041, and note the spatial approaches, the spatial options set out in because we will decide on them later in the process of the municipal year.
Do we actually need to change the figure within a local plan review? Under local plan review, do we need to change the figure from 920, Chairman, to 1041 or 1043? Is the question.
Karen,
if you read a Lichfields report that's recently been written, they're saying that only 4 out of 55 authorities have changed their figures. I wonder, have we got to change our figure?
At this stage, do we?
I think the answer is yes, we do, and the reason for that answer is because the 920 figure is based on the OAN, which was an evidence base that was following the transitional arrangements. And on that basis, when the plan reaches 5 years old, the circumstances around the housing evidence and the strategic policy that contains that 920 figure could be deemed as being out of date, and that is one of the triggers, one of the factors that inform why we need to review that element of the plan under the 5-year review period. I think it's very clear that after that timing has, because it was done under the transitional arrangements, the standard methodology is an approach to calculate housing need after that point in time would be what we would be required to follow rather than the 920. Karen may have something to add.
Karen?
Sorry, Andrew, I was looking confused, wasn't I? Because I didn't fully understand what you were saying. But in terms of a recommended decision, why don't we add something to that 2.1? Members are asked to note the emerging local housing need figure for the local plan review covering the period to 2041, whilst acknowledging other evidence may change the number, or something along those lines, something to be that I can improve
I
upon.
would be more comfortable with that. With all due respect, better worded, but
I would be sure.
Could you use the microphone?
Sorry.
Oh.
I pressed it and it hadn't gone on. My question was really, given that, I should have said this right at the beginning, but given that we're in 2024 and this is from 2021 is when we adopted our Part 1, which is where the housing number sits. And I know you're talking about this coming in 2026, and so you're calling that the 5 years, but actually this is 3 years into the plan. We're now reviewing, and I'm asking, do we need to, given that I don't think any of us want to necessarily have a higher number, do we have to review it on the basis of the 2043, the 1,043 figure now, given that 920 was valid in 2021, and we're only 3 years into that. We're only 3 years into that plan. And where I was talking about the Lichfields report is they've done a report actually complaining that local authorities aren't upping their numbers because 55 of them have reviewed and only 4 of them have changed their numbers. I'm wondering, do we want to be the 5th out of 56 local authorities that reviewed? I'm just asking that question. I thought better to ask it now than later.
Karen?
In which case Sandra's answer was probably correct, was correct in terms of the method used for calculating housing need changing. So we do have to use a different methodology, but that is the starting point, and that is why Sandra outlined in detail at the start the difference between housing need and housing requirement, so that we can specify, you know, it might not be the same figure at the end of the day that goes into the plan. And in terms of 3 years out of 5, by the time we adopt, it will be the 5 years. And I suspect the Lichfields report, there may be some local authorities who are saying, no, we're not going to review the numbers because it results in a higher figure. But I suspect there might be some that are going through the motions of preparing issues and options, preferred options, consultation, submission, and going through that full process. So they haven't actually got to a point where they've amended their figures yet.
Okay, so we are noting, don't forget that we are only noting this, and I think putting that rider in about while acknowledging this may change does help us, I think. Well, it certainly helps me. So can I ask that we take the recommendations? Local Plan Committee note the emerging local housing need figure for the local plan review covering the period up to 2041. Rob's going to give us some wording.
I was just going to say, Chair, I've got some draft wording, should it be helpful to the committee.
Sure.
To note the emerging housing need whilst acknowledging that it will be subject to change as further evidence becomes available.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So there's that, and then note the spatial approaches and spatial options set out in paragraphs 519 to 541 of the report, which will be tested by the relevant evidence to inform the consideration and drafting of the preferred options local plan review. I think we've got enough reservations and riders in there for me to be comfortable anyway. All those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Against? And 1 abstention, I believe. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. We will move on to item 9. Colchester Local Plan Review Update and Progress. I have one visiting councillor, Councillor Sunnox. Please come to the table, William, and you will have up to 5 minutes. And as we spoke about in the break, I will allow you to refer to the previous item.
Okay, yes, at risk of relitigating the previous item, and I'm pleased you put in the provisos on it. I feel we're making too big a thing of this local plan review and making it effectively into a new plan. And that's what's leading us into these higher figures. And I take the point, I hear the point about the transitional relief, but the whole point of the plan is that you're not meant to dig it up and relitigate it again and again and again. So I would, and if other councils are doing it, why are we putting ourselves to so much trouble? And I think that's something that we really should think about, especially as, you know, sitting in Great Tay, Colchester looks like a town that's being built and built and built and built. And for me, getting in, my personal gripe, every one of you probably heard it before, you know, is 45 minutes to get into Colchester along that A120. It's blocked up all the way back more or less to Coggeshall most days, most evenings. And it's just unthinkable. I can't think why we'd want to build more without sorting out that type of problem. The link road's another one, but the A120 is a major one. There's also other defences to having to take these bigger figures. And, you know, I think we really need to look at them. First of all, we're looking at need just in the Colchester, we're looking at the need for change just on the basis of Colchester and not looking at the wider housing market area. And my question is, what has really changed since we put the last lot of numbers in? Why are we, the whole principle of the local plan review, as I read more and more about it, seems to be that it's to accommodate change. If something has changed, then you have to look at your local plan. If it hasn't changed, I think we're quite defensible not doing anything. And certainly we should be looking at the wider housing market area. Colchester has taken far more than its share, far. It's the biggest district in house building terms over the last 5 years, over the last 10 years, over the last 20 years. And our number at the moment is 920, Tenderings is 550, Braintree's is something less. all the Chelmsford, I think, is 12,000 over the last 20 years, and we were 19,000 over the last 20 years. We're way, way, way ahead. We're taking more than our share when it's the demand is coming from a housing market area, not just from Colchester. The infrastructure audit, obviously, that's been well covered, and that obviously plays into it, and that's obviously part of the evidence we'll look at. And then there's one major last point, which is simply that I've looked in the House of Commons library at what it says about the standard method. It is emphatically not meant to be a straitjacket. And I feel, again, we're over-interpreting this, and we're wanting to be cast down. I understand we've got to have a plan that is absolutely cast down against developer challenge, but I feel we're going too far. It is absolutely not a compulsory thing to do. So why don't we take the approach that we stick with the 920, that if we manage to get government funding for some of this infrastructure, then we'll look at taking more. And why don't we give ourselves some leverage on the whole thing? We're short of infrastructure. The roads have not been done. The surgery has not been done. Everyone knows that. We will be getting the report. Why don't we go for the lower figure? And I'm not expecting anyone to decide on it now. I just want to feed that into the thinking.
Thank you. Karen?
Thank you. I'll start off with a positive, an agreement with Councillor Sunnox about using the term review, because I too have some dislike of the review local plan, because I think what happens next time around? Is it a review of the review? And how many reviews do we do? So if we should have just said it's a new local plan, which effectively it will be, but it will probably still contain some of what's in the existing local plan. So I think that's where the term review comes from. The decision has already been taken by this committee some time ago to review the local plan, so I don't think there is I know that decision isn't in front of members tonight, but I don't think there's an appetite to reverse that decision, and I'm not sure what we hope to gain by deciding not to review the local plan or pushing it back beyond the 5-year period. The housing study will look at the wider housing market area, and we previously had a housing market area that comprised of Colchester, Tendring, Chelmsford and Braintree, and that will be reviewed along with others, but I'm not sure what the wider housing market brings into this, other than a national level, how many we need to provide. The higher growth in Colchester really goes back to when we were a growth point, so I think that probably goes back to around the local plan 2004. There was a period of time when we were in the Haven Gateway partnership, and the whole partnership, including Colchester, opted to take additional growth, and that's really what set those higher figures, I guess. I'm not going to repeat what I've already said about the standard methodology, but I think Sandra and I have pointed out that it's a starting point. It doesn't have to be the same figure that goes into the local plan as our target. The other point is going for, I might have jotted this down wrong, but you said about going for the lower number. Where do we get the lower number from? I'm happy to look at it if you tell me where that lower figure comes from.
Yes, Councillor Sunnox, as Karen has asked for clarification, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, that's the point I wanted to come back on. It's too late to go back on a decision to review the local plan, but it depends what review means. And as my reading on it comes out, review means you look, you see what has changed, and then you decide what you're going to do about it. And I'm suggesting we continue with the review. We have looked, we only note, and we only respond to something that actually has positively changed. So then the lower number would naturally be the 920, which we've got already. I'm sure the intention isn't to uproot the numbers at every 5-year interval, especially as these plans take so long to prepare and the government is trying to cut down on this, on the sort of bureaucratic side of things.
Karen?
Okay, I don't think we can go with 920 unless it's evidence-based. If it's evidence-based, then we can go with it. And that's what the rest of the evidence might say. That might come back and say 920 is as many as you can deliver each year. But until we have all that, I can't sit here and say, you know, it's 920. It might say it should be 910, or it might say 957, but it might say 1043. And of course, any variation in terms of using the standard methodology could in fact push the number up. So when we're looking, you know, it's all very well me saying to the consultants, we want to know, we want you to investigate and interrogate if there's any exceptional circumstances. We should remember they might unearth an exceptional circumstance that says you need to build more. Like your affordable housing need is such that you should be building more houses each year so that 30% results in more affordable housing. So we just need to bear that in mind. And what's changed is, as Sandra said, the introduction of the standard method as the starting point. That's the fundamental change. If we don't produce a plan that reflects that, not necessarily the number, but to show that we have started with that figure, then we will just be at risk of A, having an unsound plan, and B, being taken to the cleaners in appeal situations. And I've been accused of using that as a threat in the past. It's not a threat. Councillor Dundas will know in Tiptree what happened, where there was a little bit of ambiguity about housing numbers and allocation of sites. Fortunately, that's the only place in the city area that did fall, really, because of that ambiguity. But I wouldn't want that to be expanded elsewhere, because I think we should plan for where that growth goes and have a planning system that is truly plan-led rather than speculative development-led.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sunnex. I think the point on Colchester meeting its housing numbers, I think is something we should be proud of, actually. And if you don't, then you get sanctioned. Some of those local authorities you mentioned have been sanctioned because they weren't meeting their housing numbers. And of course, it does affect the amount of income that you get from whatever it's now called for supplying your housing figure. So thank you very much for your contribution this evening. I'll ask Shelley to present the report, please.
Thank you. This report provides an update on work undertaken since the last local plan committee meeting. Members are asked to note progress made on the local plan review. Since work began last year, the local plan committee has been kept regularly updated on progress with the local plan review. Key points to note are that the local plan committee agreed to an iterative issues and options engagement programme and agreed to use the Green Network and Waterways and the Creating a Better Environment agenda as the starting point for the local plan review. The iterative issues and options engagement programme includes various engagements running between autumn last year and this summer. The committee have previously been updated on the Green Network and Waterways engagement and advised that all comments received to this consultation are available to view on our consultation portal. Engagement on the Developing a Vision for Colchester theme took place from February to March. Vision workshops took place with members, planning officers and senior leadership team, and 2 workshops were held with the residents panel. The workshops and public engagement all asked the same 3 questions. 151 responses were received to the public engagement, and these are all available to view on the consultation portal. The committee report includes word clouds for each of the 3 questions asked. Words that jump out under each of the 3 questions are very similar, countryside, green, park, history, Middlewick, infrastructure, diversity, housing, just some of the words that jumped out to me. And looking at the online public engagement comments and the comments from the various workshops we held, some themes and objectives have started to emerge. These key themes include sustainable, healthy, vibrant and diverse places, well-connected and welcoming and inclusive communities. We've included a visual in the committee report to show these themes. In April, Essex County Council's recommended climate change net zero policies were published for engagement. Stakeholders were asked if the planning policy position for net zero carbon homes and buildings in Greater Essex is suitable and appropriate to include in the Colchester Local Plan Review. 43 comments were received to this engagement. Responses were mixed, with generally positive responses from the public and objections from developers, mainly suggesting that planning policies should reflect building regulations. There were a number of comments supporting the net zero policies, but strongly objecting to including Middlewick ranges in the local plan. Officers will consider all of the comments made and have already shared them with Essex County Council's Climate Action Planning Unit. Officers will also continue to follow progress with the judicial review of the Government's December written ministerial statement on local energy efficiency standards update. At the February committee meeting, the committee agreed to publish a placemaking questionnaire to seek views about the pattern, scale, character and design quality of places. Consultation is currently taking place and will end on the 25th of July. Following the success of engagement with the residents panel to inform the vision, a further workshop is planned for July for placemaking, and officers are seeking to engage with younger residents directly through the Sixth Form College. Health and wellbeing crosses many aspects of planning, and the primary focus for engagement on the health and wellbeing theme is through the North East Essex Health and Wellbeing Alliance. A workshop with the Alliance and other stakeholders, including Sport England, will be held this month. This workshop will help inform the issues and options and the scope of the evidence required to inform the local plan. The placemaking questionnaire also includes a section on health and wellbeing. The planning policy team has held member briefings. These were held in February and May this year. And we've held town and parish council briefings in February and April. Following these briefings, an invitation was given for officers to meet with all town and parish councils within their town or village. So far, 17 meetings have taken place, with more scheduled over the coming weeks. Turning now to the evidence base. Local plans are underpinned by a huge amount of evidence. One of the tests of soundness is that the plan must be justified. This means an appropriate strategy taking into account reasonable alternatives and based on proportionate evidence. A separate report has already been presented and discussed, which summarises work on the spatial strategy and housing need evidence. And this report includes a table which summarises progress on the evidence base. I'll summarise some of the evidence that's already taking place. Officers are working with other council teams, the Parks and Open Spaces and Sustainability team, to prepare guiding principles for Colchester's green network and waterways, which will inform all council work related to green spaces and waterways. Officers have prepared Stage 1 of the Settlement Boundary Review. Stage 1 provides an assessment of the comparative sustainability of Colchester's settlements, and relevant sections have been shared with town and parish councils for their review. Stage 2 of the Settlement Boundary Review will include updates following feedback and conversations with town and parish councils, and will include a summary of sites assessed as part of the Strategic Land Availability Assessment, A sustainability appraisal scoping report was prepared in-house by officers. Further stages of the sustainability appraisal will be carried out by consultants. Work has already started on appraising the spatial strategy options in the previous committee report. A call for sites was held and a total of 197 submissions were received. The majority of submissions were promoting sites for residential use. However, some sites were promoted for other uses such as employment, open space, local nature reserve. In some cases, sites were promoted for multiple uses and by more than one individual, such as Middlewick Ranges. The easiest way to view the sites submitted through the call for sites is on the interactive map and the associated call for sites report. The call for sites also included a green infrastructure category to enable land to be promoted for uses such as off-site biodiversity net gain, country park, open space. No sites were put forward for off-site biodiversity net gain, and so we've launched a call for sites specifically for off-site biodiversity net gain. That's commenced and will run until the 26th of July. Finally, in January, officers commenced a desktop review to identify sites in addition to those promoted through the call for sites for further assessment as part of the strategic land availability assessment process. This process has now commenced and will be ongoing for the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley, for that comprehensive introduction. That's very helpful. I enjoyed the word clouds and the graphics as much as you did, I think. Okay, members, have we got anybody with a question or a comment on the report? Faye, Councillor Smalls?
Yes, this is a question about engaging the public, because obviously I know everybody makes a real effort to do that, but it's still a minimal amount of people relative to the population that get involved. And then what we know happens is when you get right to the point of something going through, then people will say, oh, we never knew, we weren't told. And so one of the things I've picked up, just an example, is you've said you're going to go to the sixth form college, so that's brilliant. Is there a reason that we can't go to the institute as well? Because that's people studying different types of things, maybe from different areas. And then that was leading me to think to secondary schools generally in different parts of the city, because I think it's really important to engage those young people, even under 18, because they're going to be impacted by these things the most in the future. So that these are just suggestions of a way to diversify it to people who we might not normally get to. And then just beyond that, just if as us as councillors could help try and engage our communities, and it is hard, but maybe using like because I know we've had on St Bottles roundabout, which is not us, the city, we had the consultation in the city centre, and I attended that. That was really good, but I wonder if we can look at maybe different locations to have things. But with the caveat, I realise this all costs money, and but it's just like something I'd like to think about.
Shelley?
Yes, we are always open to new ways of engagement and trying to reach different audiences. And that's what we've tried to do throughout this issues and options and carrying it out in this iterative way. Usually for issues and options, what we've done in the past and other councils do is publish one sort of composite issues and options report, publish that for a 6-week period of public consultation. What we decided to do this time is to make it iterative, so it could be ongoing for several months, and themed as well, because you may have some people that see the theme green network and waterways, for example, and think I'm really interested in that, and they might not pick up an issues and options report. So we've tried to do what we can to make the issues and options more engaging. The reason that we're going to sixth form college, I believe, is that colleagues in economic development went and did a bit of work with students there and had the contact and passed that contact on.
I mean, to be clear, I'm very supportive of you going to the sixth form college. I'm not suggesting you don't do that, but I was thinking maybe you could reach out to the institute as well, you know, to sort of balance it up so you're getting different views from different people.
Thanks, Faye. Yeah, and don't forget social media, I would always say, because I think social media is the way, especially, well, different. Not just young people engage with it, but it depends which social media platform you're talking about, but I don't think that should be forgotten in anything the council does in terms of engagement and consultation these days. Councillor Dundas and then Councillor Corey.
Yeah, very briefly, just to pick up on that, I think we also need to be very careful about the terminology we use. 98% of people have got no idea what a local plan is, why it matters to them. If we in the council can fall into a habit of using language which we use, like local plan review, but what does local plan review mean to somebody who doesn't follow the council closely? Absolutely nothing whatsoever. So I know it's difficult, but we have to be very careful that we don't think like council people when we're doing this stuff. It's just a general comment, because I just don't think it doesn't resonate with the general public. Most people's contact with planning as regards to local plan is usually, frankly, when the bulldozers start at the end of the road and they say, how did that get approved? It's no good as a councillor saying, well, if you checked 12 years ago, you'd have known it's been allocated in the local plan. So, yeah, I don't necessarily say what an answer, but I think we just always need to be conscious of the language we use with the public and getting them to engage, because we can't talk like a planning committee or a local plan committee to get people to engage.
Yeah, that's noted, I think. Shelley, anything to add?
Yes, I will just add that as part of the developing a vision public engagement, we were sort of mindful of trying not to talk like planners and ask people, what do you want to see in the local plan? So the questions we asked as part of the vision were, what three things do you like about Colchester as a place? What are the most important opportunities? What three things would you like Colchester to be known for? And also actually with the vision engagement, we spoke to our comms team, and our comms team produced a video, and that was something that went on our website as a way to sort of try and engage people. And we have spoken to comms about social media as well.
Yes, Councillor Dundas.
I mean, ever so briefly, being honest, some of the numbers in there on the number of responses, and some of them are in the hundreds. We're a city of nearly 200,000 people. You know, as an overall percentage, we've got to accept, A, it's very low, are the responses, and B, because it's very low, you might be getting strangely skewed results. So we have to be a little bit mindful as to how much perhaps store we put in some of these when you look at I don't know, I can't work out the percentage of people of the population have actually commented, but it's very, very low.
Yeah, I think we accept that point, and we can just keep trying and using different methods of communication that we can. Who was next? Councillor Corey, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't going to talk about the engagement point, but I think Councillor Smalls has made some good points, and Councillor Dundas as well. I think when we look at the fact that 197 sites, whatever, and call for sites have come forward, you've got promoters who would spend probably 30 odd grand, probably more than we do, trying to engage just developing or promoting one site. So I think we do a great job and we do the best we can, but our hands are a bit tied behind our backs. I really think the way that the local plan system is, it's quite like the feudal system. Who owns land, and therefore away you go and develop it. So I would love to see if there's more national funding. If they want us to take more housing, then we should engage in a much more greater way. I think I was going to praise the questions were open. They were understandable, because unlike most councillors, I went through the process giving my opinion. So I thank you for that, being more open. And I think Councillor Small's point as well about schools, it's future planning for many years to come, and it will involve younger people who are trying to acquire housing, whether that be to rent or buy, and we know it's really, really difficult for the younger generations. So we've got to engage them. My 2 points were going to be the call for sites outcomes said in the document the next few months. I just wondered when the specifics, when we will hear about that. And I really commend the local team in Witherden who put forward comments against the call for sites that have come up around our settlement. And then the final point is about health and well-being, and I'll declare a non-pecuniary interest as the health of the, as the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Alliance for North East Essex, that just understanding how much work has been going on, I think the aspirations of the partners within the Health Alliance and this City Council's role is really strong, but I do think we need to do more in terms of planning. And could you confirm that you think you are going in the right direction, or if we need to do more in terms of working together with health? Thank you.
Shelley?
I might ask colleagues to answer those questions. Sandra, do you want to make a start, and maybe Rachel on call for sites?
Sandra?
Yep, I'll take the last question first and just say on health and wellbeing, I think we, with the Alliance and partners, we have got a workshop arranged later this week where we want to start the engagement and also recognise the value and contribution that those partners can make to the plan making process, and also to the evidence that we use to inform the plan. And there's myself and colleagues and a good number of partners that, working with our communities team, have convened an initial meeting, which we envisage sort of meeting at periodic times to help during the next stages as we go through, so that we can optimise the input and recognise that value that we hope will be far more effective than perhaps it has been in the past.
Rachel?
Yeah, I think as she set out, the work on assessing the call for sites using that strategic land availability assessment criteria that we brought to an earlier local plan committee is continuing, and that will inform one of the evidence bases that informs the preferred option local plan. So that work is continuing. I think that that's what part of the evidence base, like all the other evidence bases, that will inform that plan.
Sandra?
Can I just add that the briefings that have been referred to, I think at the appropriate time when that some outputs from that are available, that can be form part of the discussions at the briefings when as and when it's completed. I think the reluctance to give a timescale is that officers are doing it along with everything else, and it's enormous amount of work, and it is ongoing, and we are making progress, but we wouldn't want to give you a precise timescale to then. But it will be in time to inform everything else, and members will have the opportunity as part of the briefings to see what's coming out of that.
And I'm sure the officers are all looking forward to the outcome of the general election, as we all know. That might throw everything up in the air, and they'll have to start from scratch, or what. Depends what happens. So timescales are a movable feast. Councillor Ellis.
Have you got an inside track, Chairman? You may have, who knows. Sorry, I'm new back onto this committee, so hearing, I think, Shelley and Rachel talking about the SLAR, the Strategic Land Availability Assessment. It may well have been discussed previously and recently, but I hadn't seen that. Can you just expand on, you were talking about doing the desktop study where you are looking at strategic land availability, and you're talking to parishes and you're consulting with those and expecting responses back from them. Can you explain how that's used? Is this in addition to the call for sites? So what do you do with that information? Do you then turn around and approach landowners and say, actually, we think your land would be better to develop than the land that's come forward in the call for sites? How does it work?
Before Shelley answers, I can confirm we did have a big item on the strategic land assessment availability. Was it in March?
I missed that, Chairman.
At the last meeting,
representing a number of parish councils,
absolutely.
One of the things we do is say you will have had information from the city, and they're expecting a response. It does help.
There are a number of new members of the committee, but we did have a big item on that in March. Shelley.
Yeah, if I summarise the call for sites and the desktop and the engagement with town and parish councils. So we launched the call for sites sort of at the end of last year, and that's where we went out and asked landowners to submit sites for various uses, largely housing but other uses as well. Now, there's a requirement, a government requirement, to also carry out a desktop review. So not just relying on landowners submitting sites. So the desktop review, Rachel might want to add something when I finish talking, but it sort of looks at sites, maybe it might be council-owned sites or sites with planning permission, sites in the adopted local plan, just to supplement the sites that have been put forward by landowners. Then all of those sites, the call for sites, the desktop sites, will all be reviewed as part of the strategic land availability assessment. And this committee agreed the methodology for that, and that was consulted upon and agreed by this committee. Now, the engagement with the town and parish councils, another piece of work, another piece of evidence that we're working on is the settlement boundary review. And that's what we're engaging town and parish councils on at this stage. So that's a summary of the characteristics of each of the settlements within the Colchester City District. And we use the settlement boundary review that we carried out for the adopted local plan as a sort of starting point. We updated that as officers and then sent it to town and parish councils to ask for their comments on that. We know there might be things we get wrong. For example, the review talks about local services and shops within a village, and that can change. And then I suppose to supplement that as well, we're going out, we've offered to meet with town and parish councils to discuss the settlement boundary review, the call for site submissions that have been submitted within their parish area.
Rachel, did you want to add anything? No, it's fine. Okay, Andrew, thank you. Councillor Smalls, you had another point.
Sorry, it's going back to the consultation process again, because Councillor Dundas mentioned the low numbers, and I just thought of another. Do we take into account that when people are responding to these surveys, it is a self-selecting group, so there's going to be some kind of bias there. And also, I know you get lobby groups that encourage, you know, disproportionately a number of people to answer. And I might well agree with those particular people on certain things, but it is going to distort the results you get. So I don't know if that is taken into account.
Is it? Shelley?
Well, I'm just thinking how to answer this. We take into account all comments received, and I think that wording is it is a requirement for us to consult and then produce a report explaining how you've taken into account those comments.
Okay. We do our best, I think, is what we're trying to say. Yes, Sandra.
Yeah, I think we've really tried with this local plan to try and engage differently and more effectively, and also we've been, you know, we're open to ideas to try to reach out to some of these groups more widely. We often try and it falls on deaf ears, and you know it's very difficult to actually get people to respond. But using things like the residents panel and the level of engagement we're doing with parish councils as well is much greater than we've done previously. I know parish councils may say they're not entirely, they're still representing a certain group of people, but residents panel is quite broad, and I think all of it together and all the engagement we do is, you know, even if it's informal, it helps feed in the picture, and I think we are trying really hard to do it better and be as effective as we can, recognising that local plans don't float everybody's boat. And I take the point from Councillor Dundas that the language we use, you know, we can learn from that and try and make it as wider interest as possible to engage early on.
It's not meant to be a criticism in any way. I know it is hard to engage with sometimes the groups that most would benefit from being engaged with, so I do appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Smalls. Councillor Kirkby-Taylor.
Thank you. I was just going to thank the officers for everything they've done to engage with local residents and putting this report together. I know it's not easy to reach people, and wanted to just thank expressly for the work done. And also say I'm quite pleased to see some of these results, particularly given how prominent the green and the countryside and the environmental concerns appear to be to everybody that has actually responded. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that. I think that we'll all echo that. Thank you very much. Any other points? Yes, Councillor Parson.
I did have my hand up earlier, and you did mention my name. Can I take you to section 5.40 and also section 14? 5.40 is environment-led. Section 14 is environment and sustainability implications. What's concerning me a bit is what's not in there.
See 5.40. Are you looking at the previous report?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I
previous item.
All right.
All right.
Belay that.
Anything on this
belay
item?
that comment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who's got any comments on this report? Turn your microphone off, please. Councillor Parsons, thank you. No, in that case, can we note the progress made on the local plan review? All those in favour?
Unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes our business for the evening. Thank you very much for your attendance and your contributions here tonight. Thank you to the officers. I declare the meeting closed and have a good and safe journey home. Thank you.